I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey Lurkers, welcome to this week's episode. Just a quick update, Lurk will be at the Whitehall, New York Sasquatch Festival on Saturday, September 28th. So make sure you put that on your calendar and get any hotel plans arranged that you may need. Also, our podcast host is now offering a send us a text message feature in our episode show notes. We did receive our first message about the Point Lookout episode, so a shout out to that person and thank you for listening. If you would like to send us a message through that link in the show notes, keep in mind that we cannot message you back directly, but I will make sure to give a shout out in an episode as a response. You can always email me at lurkpodcast@yahoo.com or send me a message on Facebook Messenger or any of our social media accounts. This week we are hitting the trail again, the haunted trail. We are in Connecticut now after completing the section of New York. If you're new to the podcast, the Haunted Trail is a collection of spooky stories from along the Appalachian National Scenic Trail that travels through 14 states on the east coast of the United States. So far, we have covered Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. You do not need to listen to those in order, as each episode stands on its own, but of course, if you haven't listened to the others, I recommend that you do. The Appalachian Trail is almost 2,200 miles long. Those who attempt to travel the entire length of the trail all at once are called through hikers, and it takes an average of 5 to 7 months to complete. A majority of those through hiking start in the south and travel north to Maine, which is called a northbound through hike. And that's why we're also traveling south to north and covering each state. Through hikers also can start in the north and head south, called a southbound hike, and then they can start somewhere in the middle, travel one way, then head back to their starting point and head the other way, which is known as a flip-flop. There are 52.4 miles of Appalachian Trail in the state of Connecticut, with the trail being rated from easy to moderate. First up, for our spooky location on the Appalachian Trail in Connecticut is the Falls in Kent Falls State Park. The falls are actually a series of waterfalls and cascades that travel down 250 feet before heading to the Housatonic River. There is evidence that Native Americans used to camp and fish next to the waterfall, and in colonial times there were several mills in the area. In the 1960s, it was the dramatic backdrop for cigarette commercials. Today, it's said that people tend to have the feeling of being watched when they are in the area. The feeling intensifies as they reach the top of the falls. Some talk about meeting a strange man about 1/3 of the way up to the summit. They feel extremely uncomfortable when they pass him, and they try to avoid eye contact. Once they pass, they look back, and he's disappeared. There are also reports of dark shadow figures that are seen even on the brightest of days near the summit. Just past Kent Falls State Park is the area known as Dudleytown. Dudleytown isn't an actual town, but rather an area of Cornwall where the Dudleys lived. It's considered one of the most haunted towns in the United States. It was plagued by mysterious deaths and disappearances and insanity, making many feel as though the settlement was cursed. The area was settled in 1741 by Thomas Griffiths. Gideon Dudley arrived in 1747, followed by his two brothers. The Dudleys are rumored to have brought a curse with them from England. The curse was said to have begun in 1510 in England, when Edmund Dudley was beheaded for being involved in a plot to overthrow King Henry VIII. There's a song about him. Goes a little bit like, I, Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am. The curse was placed on the family that all Dudley descendants would be surrounded by horror and death. At its peak, the town boasted 26 inhabitants, and it was said the town got nearly dark at noon because it is surrounded by 3 mountains. A man by the name of Nathaniel Carter lived in Dudleytown in 1759. At the time, a mysterious plague went through the area, killing relatives of Nathaniel. He moved his family to Binghamton, New York, where Indians slaughtered him, his wife, and infant child. His other 3 children were abducted and taken to Canada. The 2 girls were ransomed, and his son married an Indian girl, and later moved back to the States and became a Supreme Court justice. In 1792, a man named Gershon Hollister was killed while building a barn at the home of William Tanner. Tanner was reported to have gone insane, though it's possible he suffered from dementia. Tanner, who lived to be 104 years old, told people about strange creatures that came out of the woods at night, though whether it was his own delusions or actual creatures, no one can say for sure. General Herman Swifts lived in town with his wife Sarah Fay. His wife was struck by lightning while standing on her front porch and was killed instantly. The general went insane and died shortly after. Once the Civil War town began to die off, many began packing up and moving away. In 1901, John Brophy's wife died of consumption. Their children vanished after the funeral, and shortly after their house burned down in an unexplained fire. Not long after that, John Brophy himself went missing. By the early 1900s, the town was completely deserted. At the same time, Dr. William Clark fell in love with the area and bought 1,000 acres, including Dudleytown. He and his wife built a summer home there. He was called away one day, and upon his return he found his wife had gone insane. She talked of strange creatures that came out of the forest and attacked her. She committed suicide soon after. Dr. Clark continued to maintain his home, and he eventually remarried. His new wife and he, along with others, formed the Dark Entry Forest Association, which acted as a preserve so the land would remain wild forever. While the possibility of a cursed town and its tragedies are pretty spooky, there are also other paranormal happenings currently going on in the area. Visitors have experienced vortexes, cold spots, and have had their cameras and other battery-operated equipment stop working properly. Some have claimed to have been chased and slapped by unseen phantoms. There are those who have also seen wispy apparitions and mysterious lights and sounds. There seems to be an overwhelming feeling of terror experienced by people in the area, and some have reported being pushed, touched, and scratched. Some people claim that the area is a negative power spot. One group of people saw a large dark shape rising out of one of the cellars, and when they got close, they began to have trouble breathing. Whatever it is, please note that Dudleytown and the property owned by the Dark Entry Forest Association is off limits to those wanting to explore. The area is posted no trespassing, and that is strictly enforced. Stay on the trail and you'll be fine, except for those unseen phantoms. Past Dudleytown, you'll eventually come to the area of Salisbury with a rather unique story. In November of 1802, several buildings were involved in a mysterious stone bombardment. That's right. I said buildings were bombarded with stones. The activity began around 10 or 11 p.m. on a bright moonlit night. Wood and pieces of mortar, sticks, and charcoal came through a tailor's shop window. The owner observed the window break, but saw no one and no source of the objects thrown. At daybreak, the attack stopped, but that wasn't the end. The next night, the attack began on a different building. This time, it started about 9 p.m. and lasted until midnight. This continued for 2 days. On the fourth day, it moved to another house and continued on and off, glass breaking day and night for several days. People were hit by the items thrown, and a large amount of glass was broken. No one ever saw an assailant or an origin for the objects. Curiously, the objects never moved far past the windows they broke. Many of the items landed on the windowsills, almost as if someone had gently placed them there. This strange occurrence happened so often it was given its own name and was called Lithobolia, the stone-throwing devil. Today, some speculate that it could have been some type of attack from a Sasquatch or Bigfoot-type creature. Also in the town of Salisbury is a missing persons case. On July 16, 1952, 10-year-old Connie Smith walked away from a YWCA camp, and after 2 brief sightings later that day, she was never seen again. Connie was the granddaughter of the former governor of Wyoming, so no expense was spared in her search. The state police took over the investigation. They first checked a nearby gypsy encampment and staked out the property to see if she was possibly being held there against her will. Nothing ever came from that lead. The police drove around the forest in jeeps, tested scat to see if she had possibly been eaten by a wild animal, and looked into all the Revolutionary War-era ore pits, but nothing was found. After receiving a tip that she was in a shallow grave in a cemetery, the police went through each one in the area, testing the ground with metal rods, but there was never a shallow grave found. Her father rode on horseback through the woods and flew in planes looking for any sign of his daughter. It was determined that Connie had left camp and was possibly hitchhiking to town, perhaps because she was homesick. Some feel that she was abducted while hitchhiking. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing tan pants and a red windbreaker. Today, people claim to see the ghost of a young girl running through the trees. As she runs, she cries. Perhaps it's Connie trying to find her way home. If you have any information about the disappearance of Connie Smith, please contact the Connecticut State Police. Within Connecticut, there are many strange legends. One of these legends is the Raggies. The Raggies are a strange dark people that inhabit tiny farms and shacks. They're located primarily in the northwestern area of Connecticut near Mount Riga. No one knows exactly where they're from, but it's believed that they were possibly Hessian deserters from the British Army, stragglers from Lafayette's men, or York State Dutchmen. They worked as woodcutters, charcoal burners, ore carriers, and forge hands, and spoke a guttural-sounding language. They kept to themselves and intermarried. Many people thought they possessed supernatural powers, and there are rumors that they and others often saw ghosts in the isolated glens on moonlit nights. Another group of people said to live in Connecticut are known as the Melonheads. Melonheads are a small humanoid race of people with large heads. Their features are distorted as they have short torsos, large eyes, and long skinny arms and crooked teeth. Some say they communicate by telepathy. They're known to be very skittish of people and also known to terrorize trespassers. The origin of the Melonheads is unknown, though there are a few stories. One claims they are the descendants of escaped insane asylum patients, and another claims they are part of a family that was banished to the woods because of witchcraft. It's thought that their large heads are a result of needing to resort to cannibalism in order to survive the harsh winter months. They are thought to prey on humans, and most hiker disappearances in the area are blamed on them. Another legend from the region is the legend of the Leatherman. Back in 1862, before hobos came on the scene, there was a man known for walking the same 365-mile circuit year to year. He arrived at the same locations every 34 days like clockwork, and many people began having a hot meal ready for him when he arrived. He was known for his handmade leather suit that he wore, and thus began being known as the Leatherman. Some people say his spirit still walks the same 365-mile circuit between the Connecticut and Hudson rivers. No one knows for certain what the true identity of the Leatherman was. He spoke only broken English and used grunts and hand signs to communicate, though he was fluent in French. There was a story that he was Jules Bourglet from Lyons, France. Bourglet fell in love with Margaret Laron, the daughter of a wealthy leather merchant. Jules asked Margaret's father for her hand in marriage, but because Jules Bourglet's family was from a lower class, there was some objection. It was agreed that Jules would be given the opportunity to work in the Laron family leather business, and if successful, he would be granted permission to marry Margaret. Unfortunately, Bourglet made a very bad business deal that ruined the company. He left without a word and began to wander in Lyons, France. Eventually, he arrived in Connecticut and began his 365-mile journey. He always chose to sleep outside in caves rather than accept the offers from people to sleep in their barns or spare rooms. His leather suit helped him survive the elements. The story of the Leatherman's origin is in question. After his death of blood poisoning from cancer, some people claimed he told them his name was Isaac. A local historic society petitioned to have the Leatherman's grave moved away from the busy highway it was near and relocated to a quieter area of the cemetery. There was some hope that the grave would offer up some clues to the Leatherman's identity, but all that was left were a few coffin nails and dirt. Those items were moved to the new grave location and reinterred with a simple marker that reads only, "The Leatherman." But that wasn't the last anyone saw of him. The Leatherman is still walking his circuit and still arrives at his regular locations every 34 days. His ghost has been seen in the caves where he used to sleep at night. He chases those away who try to enter. People also report hearing footsteps and feeling cold spots around the cave locations, though there's no one there. Perhaps if you come across the Leatherman's ghost, you can offer up a kind word. Whatever his identity or story may be, it must have been a sad and lonely life that he led. Connecticut also has its share of Native American lore, and one is regarding the race of Little People. The Native Americans in the Connecticut region believed in the Makio-Wisung, or Little People. It was said that after nightfall, the whippoorwill signaled their arrival. They are good spirits, but must be treated with respect. They like gifts of corn cakes, berries, or meat left in the woods where they live. Whatever you do, don't look directly at them. If you're caught staring, they can point a finger at you and root you to the ground, whereupon they'll steal all of your belongings. It's said that they're similar to fairies or dwarves. They're dense and bulky and sometimes mistaken for children. They have magical powers and can make themselves invisible. If you've listened to other episodes of The Haunted Trail, you might recognize that Native American Little People are a common thread, like the Nunahai of the Cherokee. Another legend goes by the name of Hobomok. Hobomok is said to be the spirit of the dead. It is a destructive, evil spirit that plays tricks on adults, like stealing eyelids so the person can never sleep again, or twisting their feet to make them lame. It often appears in female form, seeking vengeance on those committing evil acts. after Christianity came, native people equated Hobomok with the devil. And last, but certainly not least, are the Connecticut hellhounds. Hellhounds are supernatural dogs that typically have black fur and red or yellow glowing eyes. They have super strength and speed and are sometimes the bearers of death. There is such a dog roaming the trails of Connecticut that leaves no footprints and makes no sound, even though it's seen barking. It appears out of nowhere and disappears just as quickly. So if you're out on the trail and come across a large black dog, maybe don't try to pet it. I'd pet it. I make friends with all the dogs and cats at a party. That's going to do it for this episode. I am collecting stories from the Appalachian Trail as well as other trails, so if you know of one or had an experience, send it to me at the email address lurkpodcast@yahoo.com. You can find episodes of Lurk on your preferred podcast platform or on the website at lurkpodcast.com, where you can also find the links to our social media accounts. If you like what you hear, tell a friend and consider giving us a 5-star review. And until next time, keep lurking.